All right, everyone. I believe we are live. I'm sitting there watching trying to press the button at the perfect time. Welcome aboard. If you are joining in as a replay, type the word replay into the comments. We'll get started in a few moments. Also, let me know in the comments whether you're watching on Facebook or on YouTube. And if you're here with me live, welcome to our week 2 online gathering. Type the word live into the comments. Um, Say hello, and we'll get started in a couple of moments. Just like last week, I want to start with a couple of housekeeping items. If you're new to City United, you can use the QR code on the screen to access our digital connect card. You can use that to share some of your. We can get in touch with you, help you to get connected to our church. If you're watching on YouTube, we are also on Facebook. We have a Facebook group set up for this 100-day New Testament reading challenge. There's going to be a link down in the description of this video on YouTube. We have a reading plan as well with daily devotions. We've been making our way through the Gospel of John over the last few days. Type the word "me" if you're watching and keeping up with the readings. Type the word "me" into the comments. I see Luis here. I see Bella. Hi, Tara. I see my mom watching as well. Hello to you. I see Sandra as well, and a couple others joining in. Say hello in the comments. Type the word "live" if you're here live, and if you want to invite anybody to our group here, you can. You can use this QR code on the screen. Anybody is welcome. Basically, this QR code will allow them to get their reading plan and get it to this group. If you're sort of unfamiliar with some of the things that we have in the group, at the top of our Facebook group here, in the featured section, there is a couple of frequently asked questions posts. There's an introductions post. There's also a prayer request post. So if you have any prayer requests, you can share those there. Kara says, just finished the book of John today. Awesome. Um, I hope it was good. I hope you enjoyed the week. I can't believe that in about 9 days we've made it through the entire gospel. Be starting Acts here and moseying right through the rest of the New Testament. If you did miss last week's online gathering that we had, we're going to be live here on Facebook and on YouTube every week for the 100-day challenge. You can watch the replay of last week inside of the Facebook group. It's also available to watch on YouTube. Yeah. Today, we're going to be diving into John chapter 11. Bella in the comments, audio a little choppy. Hopefully it stabilizes. Sometimes Facebook is a little bit unstable. Hopefully it will stabilize and hopefully we will be all set. What we're doing here with these online gatherings is each week we're going to basically go verse by verse and try to learn from Scripture, and I hope that this is going to be helpful for maybe someone out there today. We're going to be diving in, like I said, to John chapter 11, and let me pray, and then we'll read. So if you want to grab your Bible and open to John 11, I'm going to pray, and then we'll get into the reading. So, dear Lord, I just thank you for this time. I just thank you for this night that we all get to spend together. I just pray, Lord, that you would just use this time for your glory, Lord, that you'd give me the words that you want me to speak, and that you just help us to all learn more about you. In Jesus' name. Seeing a whole bunch more people joining in as well now. Say hello in the comments if you're just joining in. Like I said, we're going to jump in and start going through John chapter 11. Now, this is a very long chapter. There's over 50 verses in this chapter. We're not going to read the whole thing, but I am going to spend a decent amount of time reading through some different things today. And so, like I said, if you want to turn to John chapter 11, we're going to start at verse 1. It says, "Now a certain man was ill, Lazarus of Bethany, the village of Mary and her sister Martha. It was Mary who anointed the Lord with ointment and wiped his feet with her hair. His brother Lazarus was ill. So the sisters sent to him, saying, Lord, he whom you love is ill. But when Jesus heard it, he said, This illness does not lead to death. It is for the glory of God, so that the Son of God may be glorified through it. Verse 5. Now, Jesus loved Martha and her sister and Lazarus. So when he heard that Lazarus was ill, he stayed for 2 days longer in the place where he was. Now, basically, so far, Jesus has been given news that Lazarus is ill. And rather than urgently go to him, Jesus has decided to stay 2 days longer. Verse 6 says, So when he heard that Lazarus was ill, he stayed 2 days longer in the place where he was. Now, we're going to skip now to verse 14. After Jesus decided to stay where he was, him and the disciples spent a little bit of time together. So between verse 6 and 14, they just had a little discussion. In verse 14, it says, Then Jesus told them plainly, Lazarus has died, and for your sake I am glad that I was not there, so that you may believe. But let us go to him. Now, Jesus eventually obviously does go and raises Lazarus from the dead. We're going to jump now to verse 32. This is right before Jesus actually does raise Lazarus from the dead. Sometimes I have trouble saying his name. I always want to say Lazarus instead of Lazarus. In between what we just read in verse 32, there's basically some discussion with Jesus and the sisters, Martha and Mary. Verse 32, we'll pick it up. It says, Now when Mary came to where Jesus was and saw him, she fell at his feet, saying to him, Lord, if you had been here, my brother would not have died. When Jesus saw her weeping, and the Jews who had come with her also weeping, he was deeply moved in his spirit and greatly troubled. And he said, Where have you laid him? They said to him, Lord, come and see. Verse 35, Jesus wept. So the Jews said, See how he loved him. But some of them said, Could not he who opened the eyes of the blind man also kept this man from dying? Now, it's going to continue. There's going to be some discussion between Jesus and Martha. Jesus says in verse 39, Take away the stone. Martha, the sister of the dead man, said to him, Lord, by this time there will be an odor, for he has been dead 4 days. Jesus said to her, Did I not tell you that if you believed, you would see the glory of God? So they took away the stone, and Jesus lifted up his eyes and said, Father, I thank you that you have heard me. I know that you always hear me, but I said this on account of the people standing around, that they may believe that you sent me. When he had said these things, he cried out with a loud voice, Lazarus, come out. The man who had died came out, his hands and feet bound with linen strips and his face wrapped with a cloth. Jesus said to him, Unbind him and let him go. Verse 45, Many of the Jews, therefore, who had come with Mary and had seen what he did, believed in him, but some of them went to the Pharisees and told them what Jesus had done. Now, obviously, that is a lot there. I wanted to make sure that we read all of that to start today because there's a ton going on. And, last week on our online gathering, I was talking about how I sometimes like to picture scripture verses. I like to picture like being there. And I think if you were to do that with this verse, it would have definitely been probably pretty surreal. There's a whole bunch of different perspectives as well. You could put yourself in the shoes of the disciples, starting with Jesus. When he was told that Lazarus was ill, and maybe wondering why Jesus decided not to go to him right away. Maybe they were frustrated. Maybe they were questioning. Maybe they were wondering what is the delay for. You could also put yourself in the shoes of the sisters, wanting Jesus to come, finally seeing Jesus come after Lazarus had died, actually watching Jesus bring Lazarus back to life. And then also too, you could imagine being Lazarus and being raised from the dead. That would obviously pretty wild. Type yes in the comments if you agree. And when I was preparing this week and reading through the readings, I know we read John chapter 11 a few days ago in the reading plan, but there was a lot of different themes that were sort of popping up, some different things that we could have jumped into. Obviously, Verse 4, you could talk about how we could, view trials as part of God's plan, right? Where God works all things for the good. In verse 4, he says, "This illness does not lead to death. It is for the glory of God, so that the Son of God may be glorified through it." We could also talk through, trusting God's timing, right? I think, again, the fact that Jesus stayed where he was for an extra 2 days. We could dive in. We could talk about God's timing. We could also spend time talking about, dealing with grief and dealing with pain. There's going to be things that cause us grief in life. There's going to be things that cause us pain in life. And I think this verse here is a verse that reminds us that Jesus is with us, right? Jesus wept after he saw how Mary and Martha were dealing with and grieving their brother. And also, quick fun fact for you: this verse here, John 11:35, that's actually the shortest verse in the Bible. Jesus wept. That's the whole verse. A theme, though, that kept coming up for me when I was reading is doubt. Um, and if you go back to the beginning of what we just read, again, I know we read a lot of verses, but if we go back to the beginning, verse 14, it says, "Then Jesus told them plainly, 'Lazarus has died, and for your sake I am glad that I was not there, so that you may believe.'" And this is our theme verse for tonight. The topic is dealing with doubt. I think, maybe to some degree, we all, maybe deal with doubt. We may have all dealt with doubt at some time in the past, maybe, or maybe just me. But sometimes, based on how life goes or what happens in life, your faith might not be the strongest. And this is I'm actually seeing Emily joining in the comments. Hi, Emily. So you just I'm here. This isn't a topic, I think, to avoid. I think sometimes there might be some shame in this, where sometimes if someone is doubting, they feel like that they shouldn't be doubting, and then there's shame there where they feel like maybe they're not a real believer or something. And I think that that's not a good place to go either. Jeremiah 17:9 says, "The heart is deceitful above all things." Our hearts deceive us, and so I think, again, this is what I wanted to dive into tonight is doubt, and dealing with doubt. Um, First time I read John chapter 11, I began to refer to this as the Lazarus moment, which is something that happens that strengthens our faith. If you ever had something like that, type the word "me" in the comments. If you want to share about a Lazarus moment that you had in your life at some point, feel free to share that in the comments as well. One thing I find interesting, though, is that Jesus is saying this to his disciples, right? He's saying to them, and for your sake, right, for the disciples' sake, he's glad that he was not there so that they may believe. Right? Jesus is well aware of, I think, well, at least the way that I view this is, he's well aware of our humanness and our human conditions and how we are prone to weak at times, and I think that is where he's coming from when he say this, and obviously, doubting is, not a virtue, right? The Bible doesn't say it's a virtue, but it certainly doesn't avoid, talking. We see even the disciples over and over again, right? This is in Matthew 28:17. It says that, "And when they saw him, the risen Jesus, they worshipped him, but some doubted." We also see in John 20:27, Jesus saying to Thomas, "Put your finger here and see my hands, and put out your hand and place it in my side. Do not disbelieve, but believe." We also see in Luke a similar verse. Again, it says, "And they did not believe him." Mark 16:11, "But when they heard that he was alive and had been seen by her, they would not believe." All four Gospels record the disciples dealing with doubt, and I think that's significant. And like I said, Jesus knows what's going to happen. He's going to raise Lazarus, and I think a key word here again is that he's glad. Right? It says, "For your sake, I am glad." Right? He's aware what is about to happen, and he knows that it's going to help them to believe. Okay? And so the word "believe" in the Greek is pisteo. I think I'm pronouncing that correctly. And this is an interesting word. It's obviously used a lot in the New Testament. Um, it really, in most cases, is more than just like intellectual agreement. Like we agree the sky is blue. An analogy I often hear. I've listened to a few people speak on this subject, and they talk about a chair. Right? We are aware that a chair will hold us, and then we pisteo when we sit on the chair. Right? And so when Jesus is saying that you're going to believe, it's like this is going to help you to trust, right? And I think when we don't properly address doubt, pisteoing, that's a word, is difficult. Pisteoing is something that might be tough to do if we are doubting. Um, like I said, I think this is a significant verse because Jesus knows what is about to happen. And we also see, in chapter 11, we see multiple instances of doubt occurring. And before we dive in and talk about three ways to deal with doubt, I kind of want to go through these in my Bible. I have each one of these underlined, and I wrote the word doubt next to them. Verse 21, Martha doubts Jesus' timing. It says, Lord, if you had been here, my brother would not have died. Verse 37, the Jews that are around doubt. It says that some of them said, could not he who opened the eyes of the blind man also have kept this man from dying? Verse 39, Martha again, after Jesus asks her to move or have the stone moved away, she questions, right? Jesus is about to raise Lazarus. He said, move away the stone. And she says, Lord, by this time there will be an odor, for he has already been dead 4 days. And I think, again, sometimes I posted about this a few days ago here in our group. I think sometimes, before, maybe God is about to act, we hesitate. And then verse 45 is probably the most striking. This is like the moment after Jesus had raised Lazarus and told them to take off the cloths that he was wrapped in. Verse 45 says, many of the Jews who had come with Mary and had seen what he did believed in him, but some of them went to the Pharisees and told them what Jesus had done. I've always found this verse interesting because they watched what happened. They saw Jesus go up to the tomb. They were aware that Lazarus had been dead for several days, and they saw Jesus pray, and then in a voice tell Lazarus to come out, and Lazarus came out. He was alive. And some of them went to the Pharisees. Some of them might not have believed, even though they had saw what had occurred. And like I said, the main point tonight is I want to focus on three ways to deal with doubt. These are things that have helped me, and I hope that it might help some of you. The first one is that I think we need to recognize it. The first strategy of the enemy is to cast doubt in our minds. We see this right at the beginning of the Bible in Genesis 3, when the serpent is talking to Eve. It says, "Did God actually say you shall not eat any of any tree in the garden?" Right? That question, the way that the serpent asks Eve, right? Did God actually say that? Right? There's planting some doubt, and I think that in order to work through doubt and overcome doubt, we have to acknowledge it, right? Like I said earlier, I think that sometimes it might feel natural to feel maybe some shame around doubt. I certainly not immune to that myself at times in my faith. And I think the first step is to recognize it. The second step here to work through doubt is to talk about it. One of the biggest things that any believer can do is to talk about how they're doing with their faith, what they're praying about, what they're struggling with. Galatians 6:2 says, "Bear one another's burdens." Basically, an encouragement for us to talk with each other. The Bible has numerous spots, and especially in Paul's letters, talking about brotherly love and community. I think also too, when you do talk through these things with people, you might find that the person you're talking to actually does struggle in that same way. And maybe they've even found a way to work through it, and they found a way to overcome or cope with it, and that could be something that's beneficial for you. And then the third thing is to go to God, right? There's a verse in Mark chapter 9. If you've ever read this, this is there's a man who basically is coming to Jesus and asking for help to heal his sick child. Um, and he says, to, Jesus says to him, I forget the exact verse, but Jesus says to him, anything is possible if you believe. And the man says back to him, I believe, but help me in my unbelief. I think that's a prayer that I've prayed on more than one occasion. I think that one of the best ways to deal with any doubts around anything, not just with our faith, but just doubting, our potential or what something we're working on or something we're hoping for. I think if we go to God with it and say, God, I believe that this is you, that you are in this, but help me in my unbelief. I think these three things here are a model, I guess, for us to utilize when it comes to dealing with that. And this theme verse here is what I want you to take from tonight's online gathering. I pray that if you're dealing with doubt, that you would recognize it, that you would talk about it, and that you would pray about it. One of the most common prayers that I have is that I pray that God will help me to perceive Him. I think sometimes it's easy for us to maybe not recognize God in certain spots, and so one of my most common prayers is for God to help me perceive Him. And so I pray that all of you watching this tonight, whether you're with me live or whether you're watching as a replay, that God will help you all to perceive Him as well. And like I said, we're going to be doing this every week. Thanks for hanging out for a little bit tonight with our week 2 online gathering of the 100 Days of Prayer New Testament Reading Challenge. If you are watching with us on YouTube, like I said at the beginning, we do have a Facebook group set up for this. Inside of the group, we've got we'll have the group open until about July. If you're watching this in July on YouTube, the group is no longer. If you're watching this relatively soon to, or relatively around the time when I'm doing this live stream, you can use the QR code on the screen. You can also share this QR code with anyone. They'll be able to join us as well inside of our group, and you'll be able to download the reading plan that we have. And it's been really fun so far, and I hope to see you there. Like I said, thanks for hanging out for a little bit tonight. I hope you guys all have a great rest of your week. I hope you guys had a great Wednesday today, and watching as a replay, share, please do. Thanks for hanging out, and I hope you guys have a great rest of your night, and God bless.